Welcome back to Man vs. Meeple, the show where we talk about all things board game related. I'm your host, David Waybright, and we're here today to talk about the Manhattan Project, Energy Empire. This is a new one from Minion Games. It's for 1 to 5 players. I never played the original one, but this one has got me really excited. Not quite as excited as this guy over here, though.
Yeah, you're missing out if you haven't played the original Manhattan Project.
I know.
It's a fantastic worker placement. And not to spoil things too much, but I think this eclipses it for me, and we'll get into that in a little bit. We're not going to explain all the game. There is a lot of game here to take part in. It is a worker placement, and there are, I believe, 13 places on the board that you can go to, so quite a few different locations, not to mention the locations that you can physically buy and place in your tableau that you can also activate.
Which is one of the cooler parts of the game for me.
There's so many variable aspects to this game. This hits everything that I enjoy. I'm already getting into the pros because I'm so excited. But
if someone set out to build your
perfect game,
dream game,
this would probably be it.
This is definitely headed in the right direction for sure. I mean, for starters, it's a medium, maybe slightly more weight Euro game.
Sure.
Worker placement.
Yep.
These are Jeremy's and mine to some degree, but really Jeremy's sort of wheelhouse for sure.
Yeah.
All of the other elements that are going on here and the way they've put it together really make it an incredible package. So let's get into it.
So in the game, you have a board in the center that players will be using their workers to start with. Every player starts with a singular nation that is variable. You get 2 at the beginning. You choose 1 to use, which gives you some starting abilities. It also gives you a way to power your United Nations track by using certain abilities on your turn to move that up. And the other card simply gets flipped down to use as a player aid. So on your turn, you're allowed to either place a worker. When you place a worker, it has to be on the main board, and then you're allowed to activate any cards that you have collected through the course of the game and power up those abilities, including your nation card.
Right, depending on where you've gone. There's some really cool dynamics between where you've placed on the board in a particular turn and which cards you can activate, because there's 3 main sections here: government, industry, and commerce, which each give sort of a different flavor. We found that you can kind of go a heavy government route or a heavy industry route or mix and match. But when you go place your worker in the government section, that will allow you to activate your government cards and so on and so forth.
Right. So the whole idea behind the game is that you are creating your own little city, so to speak, and trying not to pollute your environment. That environment is represented by a board in front of you that has an air section, a land section, and a water section. Each that give you victory points for not getting them polluted by the end of the turn.
Yeah, those will basically be covered up with pollution throughout the game.
Right.
And trust us,
it'll be polluted.
They will get polluted. You can do your best to get some of that off of there, and you can get a lot of it off of the board. But we played a game just last night where someone ended with maybe half of their board polluted.
Not very environmental friendly person.
No.
So the game is actually driven by the pollution. How long the game lasts is how quickly the world that the players are playing in gets polluted, and that's done by a track on the bottom left-hand corner of the board. You start off with 4 in each of these 6 sections, and that builds up. You get +1 to that 4 for every player over 2 that you start with. And each time one of those sections, or each time someone pollutes the environment, either by a card draw or an event or something that happens, they have to physically take one of those and place them anywhere on their board they so wish.
Right, so they're not coming from a general supply. No. They're coming from this track. And what's cool, like Jeremy was saying, you can kind of have some control over the speed of the game for sure, because you could go heavy pollution, and if you feel good about your points and your ability to clean off at the end of the game, you can speed the game along. Okay. And basically, every time you go through one of these stacks, it's also cool. It triggers a global impact event. Right. And if you can see on this board here, the first 3 are going to be green. They've all got some negative aspects to them, but when you get into the last 3 rounds, if you will, the red ones really ramp up the nastiness in terms of what's happening to all the players. Usually each of those cards give some points for what spaces you have empty. but then also have sort of an event that takes place that affects everyone.
Sure. So, as I previously mentioned, on your turn, you can either do a worker placement or you can generate. So, we'll continue going with the worker placement portion. You place on the board by placing one of your available workers anywhere that you wish to go on the board. All these gray spots that you see are worker locations. We won't get into too much on what they do because it's really irrelevant. There's a lot of different spots and a lot of different things you can do. However, when you go to, you can go to spots where other players have been. However, you have to use energy that you've collected on a previous turn to be able to go there. So, say for instance, David has gone to a spot and he's placed one of his workers somewhere. I can still go there, but I have to place +1 energy for whatever is there. If someone goes to that same spot, they'd have to place a worker and then 2 energy. So you can kind of. You're never truly blocking anyone out of the game, but you can block people out, which is really, really cool. A portion of the game that I really enjoy is that you can physically go there with 1 worker, or you can go to an empty spot with 1 worker and 6 energy, making the next player require more to be able to go there. So there is a little bit of that interaction. That's really the only interaction.
Yeah, it's like many worker placement games that blocking people out is there. It's not as clear. It's not as in your face and clear in this one.
Yeah.
But it actually, what you were just mentioning, it adds a nice layer of strategy where if you have a round where you've generated a lot of energy to use, and we'll get to that in a minute, how you generate that, you could, like Jeremy said, go there with a lot of energy. I've never seen it happen yet, but you could go to a space with a lot of energy and effectively completely lock it down.
You could. The other thing you can do on your turn, as we said, you can actually activate any of the cards that you've collected. All these cards have abilities. They have victory points for them. Sometimes they pollute your environment, and then they have abilities that you can use. When you go to a specific location, if I went to industry that turn, I can also activate this by placing a worker at energy. And you can do that as many times as you have the same location that you placed.
Right, and those
pretty simple.
Those are just for you to use. So when you've collected those cards, you're building this sort of like tableau of cards at your command, if you will. And this is one of those things that really pushes my buttons because I love machine building. So you can get a lot of green cards and get a little engine built up to use the science
which this game excels at. The whole engine building portion does
engine
really,
building
really well.
Combined with a great worker placement. I mean, it really is nailing 2 of my favorite things. But using the different currencies and the way they all interact with one another is really, really well done.
And the other thing you can do, no matter where you go on the board, you can also activate your United Nations track. It's different for every player. It simply allows you to pay a specific number of resources to move up along this bottom track. That gives you additional victory points at the end of the game, and if you're leading, you get some additional victory points on top of that. So the other thing you can do on your turn, if you decide not to work or you've placed all your workers on the board, you can also generate. Generate's kind of a 5-step process. In a nutshell, what it does is it allows you to pull all your workers back and to regenerate new energy. You regenerate the energy from the dice that you've collected. There's 5 different types of dice. The trick is in this game is that some of these dice that you see up here, the blue and the green, are non-pollutant dice. They're just good for you. But
clean energy.
They're clean energy, but they don't produce a whole lot of energy for you. Now, once you start getting into the nuclear energy and the petroleum dice and whatnot, you will more than likely pollute your environment by using them, and it's done in a specific way by rolling all of your dice, and whatever the highest number is, if there's a pollutant symbol on there, you take one of these, and again, it progresses the game, and you pollute your environment. The other thing you can do is if you have any energy or any workers left, a combination of any of those 2, you can take an achievement.
Right here in the lower right-hand corner of the board, these are basically scoring tiles for the end of the game. So they might say you get 1 point for every government card you have, or 1 point for every sky space that's not polluted, things like that. So as you're going through the game, you can kind of look over there and go, oh, I've got a lot of money. I'll try to get that one that gives me money points.
And you can only have 5 of those. And they only can have a maximum of 5 points at the end of the game per tile that you have. But it's another way to score points, and it's a good timing system for the game, too. You can really decide, hey, do I want to use all my workers this turn because there's some key placements I need to do in order to generate my engine, or do I just want to back off and maybe grab an achievement that I'm working towards as well? So,
one of the cool things that we haven't even touched on yet is, if it wasn't implied already, the turn structure in this lags. So everyone's not on the same round. And this is the first game I've played kind of like that, where in most worker placements, everyone places your workers, everyone removes your workers.
Yeah.
This one, I might still be placing my workers, and Jeremy's decided to generate. So it's kind of an interesting timing mechanic, because when he generates, and I'm still lagging with like 2 more workers to use, there's some energy, then I'm thinking, oh, I better generate soon, perhaps, because Jeremy's going to go out there and grab some spots that are open,
Sure,
making it harder for me to go there.
Sure.
So there's some interesting timing there, because I've never seen anything like that. But it kind of it makes you feel like you're playing your own little game, but you still have to pay attention to what everyone else is doing.
Guys, we really, really just kind of glazed the surface with this game. There is a lot going on in here. It's not difficult though. It's not as you said. It's not a heavy Euro. It's very medium weight.
Yeah.
But there's so many variables to it, and so many options that you can take on your turn. It makes it feel like you are progressing in a very natural way, in a very exciting way, because you're building something in front of you almost every round.
Right, I would say...
Or every turn, because there is no rounds really in the game.
It might look pretty overwhelming, but if you've ever played any worker placement game, this really wouldn't be too hard to grab into. Now, I wouldn't exactly call this your gateway to worker placement games.
No.
You probably want to warm up with something a little more basic first, but this game really almost in many ways perfects a lot of the mechanics that I love about worker placement games and other games like engine building games.
Right. I'll just say it. This is an early contender for my game of the year. I really love this. There's a lot of good games that came out this year. It pushes all the right buttons for me. It has there's a lot of options in it. There's a lot of variable stuff in it. The use of the dice. We didn't mention like in-a-game scoring, but the dice that you collect are dangerous because they pollute, but they also give you points.
Yeah, everything in the game has an association with points and also in-game mechanics.
Point salad. I mean, it's very much a point salad type game too. The cards that you collect give you points. Typically, using specific cards will give you points. The achievements will give you points. The United Nations stuff will give you points. When you don't pollute your environment, that gives you points.
Right. So what's cool about that, just like any point salad type game, is you might feel like you're doing really well and killing everyone, or you're way behind. Then in the end of the game, and you add it all up, you realize, oh, he'd been going up the United Nations track really well, but his whole place is polluted, and I'm getting all those points.
Yeah.
So you have to make those choices. You're not going to be able to nail everything.
And we've noticed that, too. We've played several of these games, and we've noticed that there's a lot of different paths to scoring points.
Oh, yeah.
We've had a lot of differences between the strategies that the players that we've played with have used. You've used the same strategy a couple times.
I'm a sucker for nestling into one strategy. So, yeah, I've gone heavy on government, but someone we played with last night really let their world go to
hell in a handbasket. Right.
I mean, there's 3 nuclear pollution and a whole lot of other pollution and a couple oil derricks.
That player didn't win, but they weren't that far behind, which is the point I'm trying to make. The point spread wasn't huge for them because they were able to make it up with a large number of buildings that they had bought and used through the course of the game.
Yeah, in fact, they had the most points out of buildings. They'd gotten, I think, all 5 of their achievements. I'd only gotten 2 or 3 of my achievements, but I'd gotten a lot of points otherwise on my world.
Yeah.
Yeah, the game, I don't think I'll go so far as to say absolutely on my list for Game of the Year, but it's probably likely that it will be added to that list.
It's fantastic. There is absolutely nothing with this game that I do not like. I really tried to think about something that I didn't enjoy about the game, maybe a component aspect or an art aspect. And I think
you know what?
fits.
We totally talk about glazing over something. Yeah. Components.
They're fantastic.
These are amazing components. You've got these little steel beams that are painted silver. Actually, heavy metal barrels for the oil, plastic. You can't complain anything at all about the components. And
it uses some of the same artistic style as the Manhattan Project, which I enjoy as well. So this is fantastic. I love it.
Yeah. So that is the Manhattan Project Energy Empire.
Gushed a little bit.
We did gush a little bit, but this game is gush-worthy for sure. It is a really good one.
Make sure you guys make comments below on our YouTube channel. We are giving away a copy of this, so check for the date on when that contest ends. Subscribe to us on YouTube, like us on Facebook, and follow us on Twitter. And we'll catch you guys on the next Man vs. Meeple.
Bye-bye.
Season 1 of Man vs. Meeple is sponsored by TMG Games, publisher of great games like Yokohama, Guilds of London, and the soon-to-be-released Colosseum.